everyone, and welcome to Unplugged. I thought I'd open it by saying that therapy is in session. I think that's a reasonable way of describing it. It was another pretty grim afternoon. I remember texting a mate during the early part of the last quarter and just actually saying that word grim. And it did, we've lamented various disappointments over the course of the season, and certain losses have been more frustrating than others, and certain losses have been pretty sobering. This felt like one of those sobering losses. The Fremantle loss in a lot of ways was as well, because you're in the game for a bit and then they just went up a gear and we couldn't go with them, which was disappointing. And then the first quarter against Melbourne, I felt we were very lucky we weren't 50 points down at quarter time. It was an abysmal first quarter. I think we had the first three inside 50s of the game, and then it was 22-7 at quarter time. So that's 22-4. From that point on, they had 11 scoring shots in a row and kicked 4 goals, 7. So they let us off the hook. Second quarter, we're obviously a lot better and defended well, and probably could have been a tiny bit closer. Liam Henry obviously put that out in the full on the run from about 40, and they scrounged a goal late. And then obviously in the third quarter, they re-established control and blew us away. But one thing I think we could pride ourselves on is that over the last couple of years, when we've been beaten, we've been in the contest. Even against Adelaide last year when we got flogged, it felt like, we were a good side that was a little bit down, and there were periods in the game where we put some good passages together. But this looked like a game where we weren't in the same class as the opposition, and that hasn't happened all that much, certainly under Ross really ever, and certainly in this little time frame. But yeah, and again, we've mentioned it a number of times. It's all about what happens next, and things can change very quickly one way or another. But clearly there are some tough decisions that are going to have to be made. But as I've said all along, if last year told a story and this year tells a story, which one's more true? And where's the reality sit? H, I'll welcome you in first. What did you make of that? It turned sour very, very quickly.
It was a pretty ordinary day. I mean, we again kicked the first goal of the match, or Mitch Owens kicks the first goal of the match, and then things just turned for the worse. It was just we just seemed to switch off. We kicked the first goal, and all of a sudden it's okay. Now we're just chasing all day, and that's what it felt like. We just felt like we were just chasing him all day. The ball would hit the ground, you'd see 3 to 4 of them basically surrounding it and going, where are we? Where are our players? The ball would, they would have a bad kick, and all of a sudden it would somehow still go straight to them, or we'd fumble and they'd be right there to pick it up and run off again. It was just one of those days that just, it didn't feel like there was much effort there. It didn't feel like there was much want for the ball, or want to chase a player down, or want to basically help out your own teammates, help out just anyone. It was like half the team may have turned up, and the other half sort of felt like they were going to do it for him. It's just like the way we were just pedestrian, and yeah, it was really hard to watch. I can't remember as being, I guess, that kind of bad, that kind of just slow, ordinary in many occasions. Yeah, it's really hard to describe. It's sort of what we were doing. Um, yeah, I saw what I don't know how many players, not many at all, really throw themselves in, really go in hard at the ball. It was a lot of just, let's try to win the ball back when it hits the ground, or that. But too often we weren't the first one there. And as we saw after we kicked the first goal, Melbourne they had the opportunity to kick 10 goals on us, and probably should have. And 38 was it 38? I'm pretty sure 38 points was quite. Yeah, it should have been a lot more when you look back at it, because yeah, I mean, 14-16 could have been 25 goals quite easily for Melbourne, and yeah, it probably deserved to be the way we were playing. So if we don't turn up, it's yeah, that's what's going to happen. We're going to get beaten quite easily, and we're just lucky on the day that they didn't have their kicking boots on.
Yeah, and look, 41 tackles, easily our lowest number this year, our lowest number since Ross came back at the start of last year. Phil Daladakis in place of Nick. He's been our super sub alongside Michael Egan throughout the course of this year and last as well. But Phil, yeah, I mean, if tackles are an indication of effort, that says a little bit, and zero of those tackles rewarded, which indicates that even they weren't sticking too well. I think it was 41 tackles, zero holding the ball. So that says a bit, I think, about the execution too.
Yeah, well, I think H said it that the scoreline flattered St
Oh
Kilda.
yeah.
I think that was probably the worst first quarter of football I've seen for many years. We've seen us lose games before, but they were largely uncompetitive in that first quarter. It looked like Melbourne were playing their seniors versus an under 16 side. Such was the ease of what they were doing. And I think, I've tried to reflect on some of the causes, the reasons, etc. I think confidence is a big one. They're clearly low on confidence. We've got players with really poor disposal efficiency, which I'll talk about a little bit later when we do votes. But I think that beyond what the usual assessment is, the fact of the matter is we don't have the top end talent that other teams have at the moment. That was best displayed against Melbourne. When you've got a starting midfield of Max Gawn, Viney, Oliver, and Petrarca in the middle, that's one of the top three midfields in the competition. And I admire the fact that we keep putting young guys into the middle so that they're learning their craft. And that means that we're a ways away from it, but we don't have the top end talent. The club knows it. The supporters definitely know it. But at the same time, we're trying to blood young kids. And so something's going to give. And what I'd really like to see from the club is some honesty. And that's not coming out and saying that we're doing A, B, and C. I want explanations from the club. So, for example, Brad Crouch got, 38 touches 2 weeks ago in the Magoos. They decided to leave him in the reserves again, or for Sandy, my apologies to all you Zebs out there, this last week. Now, he wouldn't have made the difference 38 points, but he would have certainly made a difference in the middle. So what was their thinking? Did they leave him out because they actually genuinely want to get more game time into him? Was there something that they didn't like about the game at Sandy, even though he got a huge number of possessions? What is it that has kept him out? Hunter Clark, are they wanting to get Hunter Clark's confidence back in his body? Is that why they've kept him at Sandy? Because quite frankly, I'd rather Hunter Clark getting possessions in the seniors and getting his fitness there than playing him down at Trevor Barker Oval on a cold, wet autumn's day. So they're the kind of things I'm looking to the club to be able to explain and give us some understanding about what they're doing. Because then when you're a supporter and you go to the game, then you go to the game with a different level of expectation. You can go to the game understanding about what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, and why they've picked the team that they have. And we're not getting that from the club at the moment. And that kind of honesty doesn't change the game plan. It doesn't change the way that they should attack the football, but it does allow us, as we go to the game, to know what they're on about.
Yeah, and I think, look, we're left to put two and two together. Obviously, they didn't pick Crouch. They were like, okay, they obviously feel he needs another one. Well, it'd be great if they could come out and say he needs at least two at VFL level. So it doesn't matter if he gets 805 possessions this week, he has to play another game because we've got to get Miles in the legs. Or Richmond were undermanned, so 38's 38. But we've got to see him do it again in a match hardened environment. The Hunter Clark one was interesting because it felt like he'd done enough to be ready. So what's the criteria there? And even this week, I mean, Jack Hayes has popped up as being out for 6 weeks. Now that's something in itself, but he didn't play on the weekend. So was he already injured? Don't know. But yeah, look, it'd be nice if those things could be made a little bit more clear in terms of that communication. And it was interesting. I was talking to Saints fan today back in Trafalgar, my old hometown, and he was saying that he actually watched the game on a corporate table with a bunch of Melbourne fans. I think it was 2 Saints fans and 8 or 9 Ds. And there's that small part in the back of your brain where obviously you want to be as competitive as possible. But when we were down by nearly 10 goals in the last quarter and we kicked those 4 junk time goals, he walked away from the game almost second guessing himself, because there was a part of his brain that thought, well, I wish we didn't do that, because it patched over some cracks a little bit and it was totally meaningless. And obviously Ross mentioned it in the presser as junk goals. And sometimes you can, paper over some holes. And if you don't kick those goals, it might be like, shit, this is how bad this actually was. And that's more realistic, but you would never actively think that. But I can understand where he's coming from when he makes mention of that point. So, yeah, and look, Melbourne have had our measure a bit over recent times, but never quite to that extent. And look, if someone had said at the start of the year that we'd be underdogs against West Coast at any stage of the season, home or away, I think you'd be surprised. And look, the Eagles have beaten Melbourne and Freo in Perth and ran Essendon to 6 points, I think. So they're clearly going all right on their home deck, and that's the reality. But look, it's another winnable game. But look, I just hope we hold the line and don't panic. Now, I'm just going to quickly run through this before we do the votes. I sent this around, and H, you're in the group as well, in terms of how I categorized each player. So I'm going to tell you the lists that I've created that these players, that I've put them in, and you can tell me if any of them are in the wrong place. So this is a list of players that definitely appear to have a future. Higgins, Windhager, Nass, Owens, King, Stocker, Dow, Wilson, Henry, Filippo, Battle, Garcia, Caminiti. Senior core at the top of their game: Steele, Marshall, Sinclair, Wilkie. Veterans who are still good enough but aren't going to play for too much longer: Hill, Crouch, Wood, Butler, Webster. Players that look finished or very close to finished: Jones, Howard, Cordy, Ross, and Membry with question marks. Players that just might not be up to it: Burns, Patton, Sharman, Ellison. Jury's out with their body: Clark and Hayes. And then unknown as to what category they belong in: Hasty, Collard, Schoenmakers, Heath, Houghton, McLennan, Van Ness, and anyone else I might have missed. Does anybody jump out as being in the wrong category in that list? Or
I could possibly argue to move Howard up a little bit. I think he just had a bit of a bad run with injuries and things.
yeah,
The time he's had on the ground, he has shown good things. I think he needs the game time to be playing good football, and that's what he's struggled with recently. So I don't think he's done. I don't think he's
fair.
done yet. But yeah, I mean, he could quite easily turn around and turn back into Dougal again, and yeah, we'd be saying, yeah, don't get rid of him, sort of thing. But I think the time he's had on the ground this year, he hasn't been all that bad, to be honest. And we we lose someone like him, we've got to find someone to replace him with, and that's where our big issue would probably be. So yeah, I wouldn't be riding him off just yet. So
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, to suggest finished, probably harsh. Maybe he goes up into the senior player that might not have
not
a huge
quite at
shelf
their
life,
best at the moment.
but yeah, could do something. Phil, I put Garcia in the kids of the future, but I put Hasty and Collard as undecided. Is that fair, or would you suggest that they have a future that's clearly defined?
Well, I think they've got a future up till the end of next season to begin with. So I think that's a little bit unfair at this stage of their career. They're young kids. I think the way that Will Hasty took that goal 45 meters out on a 45-degree angle at Marvel a couple of weeks back, I thought demonstrated that he's got the mental approach and fortitude to succeed. I think he did some nice things as well with his disposal. So I think there's enough there. He's just got a light frame, right? All the kids do, unless they come in and they're the number one draft pick and look like they're Ben Cousins already. But and I say that deliberately, given that he plays at West Coast, right? But so I think he's fine. And again, I think Collard also has shown quite a bit in glimpses. But what are we expecting from a first-year player in a second, third, fourth round draft pick to come in and dominate? So we will talk with David Seirakowski in a little bit, and people have to remember that players like David spent a lot of time in the twos, and they were genuinely the seconds back in the day. And so that allowed players to naturally build out and develop their games and get better and understand what they needed to do and how they needed to do it. And I'm not sure that we have the time to give those players with the list. And that might be a commentary on the fact that St Kilda has an affiliate club in the Sandringham Zebras, as distinct from obviously our own team. But, that's another cost. And can the club afford that cost at the moment? So there are all these things you have to weigh up or not. But we've invested in development. We've got, is it Damien Carroll at the club now doing the development of the players? We've got and brought in Simon Dalrymple to look after our national recruitment and review of players in sort of the second tier systems around the country. So we're still at the beginning of this journey. I know that this is the second year for Ross and supporters with him back at the club, but we're literally at the beginning of the journey of trying to re-engineer our list into something that will be competitive in 4 and 5 years. And I don't think that there's one St Kilda supporter out there that thought we were going to be premiership contenders this year. The difficult thing is watching the game style and trying to work out what we're trying to do and what the players are trying to achieve. Because if we look back at that game with Melbourne on the weekend, it was very difficult to be able to walk away with any kind of positive takes at all.
Before we get to the votes, any thoughts on the evolution of Ross's presses? I mean, we spoke a lot last year that he was about the the wise grandfather, that if you were having a bad day, he'd kind of be able to sit down and go, no, this is how it is. It's all right. This, and this. And then you'd walk away with it making sense, thinking, oh, okay, I feel a bit better about things now. You've explained it. It's clear. It's a little bit different now in that I think he's almost trying to wrap his arms around the players and defend them, in the sense that, he'll often make points that haven't been asked. Like he mentioned that no side had played as many players under the age of 21 and still played finals as we did last year, which is a very good point to make and one of those reassuring statements. But it feels as if he's been a little bit more defensive, almost like the Ross of the bubble years, if you will, where he's kind of bubble wrapping the players in a lot of respects. H, have you seen a bit of a change this year?
Bits and pieces. At times there's almost been a bit of a feel of he's like the parent of that kid at school who's a little bit having, I guess, some trouble, and he's trying to do the best for it, but behind the scenes he's getting the report card every term and it's going down as it goes, and he's just a bit like, this is, I'll put on the happy face for and try my best in front of everyone else, but it's behind the scenes it's sort of a bit not going so well. But he's the hardest person to read at the best of times, and whether a one win will put a slight smile back on his face, or a change in form or something will do that, or if we go down further, where's he going to go to from there? I'm just wondering. But we're sort of in, I guess, a place where we wasn't last time he was with the club, in having a list that young. It's not really something he's had at any team. The most inexperienced team I think he's ever coached before. These teams he's playing now, I think, was that game against Hawthorn in 2009. The, I think that was probably the most least experienced team he's ever coached. But the club was so up and about at that point that the kids were playing for positions in a successful team. At the moment, it's a bit of, well, we're not going great, and I'll play a bit for myself or play a bit for, yeah, it's just not ticking along the same way again. And yeah, you can kind of see that he can see things aren't going the right way. So how he's going to react if we somehow manage to beat the favourite Eagles this week, or we fall to him, it's going to be really interesting to see how he reacts to it.
Yeah. And I know he's copped a little bit of criticism for it, for deflecting, like the Hawthorn game about runner use and all of that sort of stuff. But I think that's all deliberate, in the sense that I'll get them talking about something else that I want them to talk about, so they don't put pressure on Filippo or Sharman or whoever else it may be. So I think that's admirable. And obviously we'll see what happens next in terms of that. But wrapping up that game with the votes. Now, obviously, last week we had a clear-cut best on ground. I've actually gone 9 players across my 10 votes this week. I thought Jack Steele was our best player, so I gave him 2 votes. Not dominant, but our best player. And then there are a bunch of guys that did a bit. I thought Brad Hill didn't get a stack of the ball, but was dangerous with it. Certainly sparked us a few times in the game. Sinclair wasn't great by his standards, and for a 30-possession Jack Sinclair game, it was nowhere near the best one of those, but he did enough. I actually thought Wilson was our cleanest player over the course of the game and did some good knock-ons and good taps and won a bit of it, and is a running machine. I certainly don't think he did anything wrong on the day. Mason Wood, very good wingman's game, suited to the G. Thought Nass was pretty good, probably our second best player if there was a standout. I thought King and Higgins, I mean, they've had 32 possessions, 9 marks and 5 goals for, or something between them. So I think that's a reasonable contribution. So I gave them both votes, and I gave Liam Henry a vote. Wasn't sensational, but a little bit more like what we want to see from him. That was closer to the Collingwood game he played when he got injured. So that's how I've sort of seen it. Phil, I might handball it your way before H closes out those votes. How did you distribute your 10?
Yeah, so initially I really struggled to find people to fill 10 votes. So I think I started just giving people for turning up at the game. Jokes aside, I gave 1 vote to Jack Steele. I only gave him 1 because whilst he had 33 possessions, he did it at 66% disposal efficiency. And to put that into context, Riley Bonner, who continues, unfortunately, to be a whipping boy for too many people at the club, his disposal efficiency was at 80%. Now, the other reason that I only gave Jack 1 was because there was no better indication of how the team were playing when I think it was late in the third quarter, where he was streaming with the ball, kicking it into Max King in the forward line. And instead of kicking it over Max's head for him to be able to turn and run into the space, he, of course, did what a whole lot of the guys do. They put it right on top of his head, which allowed Stephen May to intercept the ball and take it away. And you know, when you're not kicking it to your forward's advantage, you need to be leading by example, rather. So 1 to Steele. I gave 1 to Mason Wood. 5 score involvements, 27 possessions, but also at 62%. So I think, you know, I said that I'd talk a little bit about disposal efficiency. And it's no surprise that the guys that we want to have the ball in their hands are down on confidence. Like, there's nothing else that you can put it down to. Another vote to Jack Sinclair, 6 score involvements, 30 possessions, also at 60% disposal efficiency. And then Wanganeen Miller got 30 possessions, but up to 70% disposal efficiency. You're probably starting to see a theme with how I gave my votes. I gave 2 votes to Higgins, 7 score involvements, 18 possessions at 83% efficiency. And I might get criticised for this and I'll wear it, but I gave 3 votes to Max King. I gave 3 votes to Max King. He had 6 score involvements and he kept presenting. And I've got to tell you, there must be nobody in our team that is more frustrated than Max King, because I understand that the club might not be thrilled with some of his repeat efforts, but when you are a forward and you get the delivery like he does, I am surprised that he continues to present week in, week out when he's fit, because otherwise I'd probably chuck a hissy fit of great proportions, given how poorly served he is.
Reminiscent of one of our former guests, Matthew Richardson, that we had on the show, talking about Spud a year or so ago. But no, I agree with that. It looked like Max King was on. It felt like if we had a half decent day, he would have kicked 6. The way we were going. But H, your 10.
Yeah, I've completely turned the tables this week from last week. Last week I gave one player 5 votes and the rest 1. This week I'm giving all 10 1. And I've done this in no particular order except for alphabetical order, because that's pretty much how they rolled out to the ground, it feels like at times. So they gave 1 to Paddy Dow. I think he did fair. He was a fair player on the day. He didn't shine, but he did some pretty good things out there. Liam Henry, again, did a couple of good things, but a couple of things that probably on a better day wouldn't have happened. The kick out in the full into the pockets and things like that. On a good day, he hits targets. Jack Higgins, as Phil said, he was there. He played a good game. He was presenting, getting in, doing what he could. But as with all of them, again, a few things let him down. Hill ran as much as he could, gave us a few things. Again, possession let us down at times. King, 3 goals, 7 clangers. That's the issue there. Sinclair, 33 touches, no impact. Steele, maybe it wasn't the leader game that we've had a lot of over the time. He's picked up teams in those situations and dragged them through, but he just couldn't get the team to follow this week. Naz, plenty of the ball again, but not a lot of damaging impact. Wilson ran like all day and did as Parker said, a few good things. And Wood, he is as consistent as always. Didn't have as much impact as what he could normally, but yeah, had a lot more than a lot of the other players out there on the day. So there's the 10 that I thought turned up the most on the day, and that's that. I couldn't pick out anyone that I was like they deserve more than anyone else, to be honest.
You keep rolling, H, with your Jason Blake award out of that game. It's probably one we can find those out of the spread of votes.
I'm probably the Paddy Dow. He's come in and done all right so far. There hasn't been much, I guess, talk about him as yet through any channels anywhere, and no real, I guess, big ups about him. But he's had 15 and a goal and 21 in the first 2 weeks he's come back. Decent performances for his first 2 games for us. He's only played not quite 2/3 of the game, so numbers wise, that's reasonably good. So let's just hope he has a really good run, because at some stage he's going to provide us a bit there.
Phil?
Yeah, so if I go back and have a look, Jason Blake, I'm going to Jimmy Webster. I thought that he had a really good game coming off the half-back flank. He also had, I think it was 6 score involvements, which means that he was trying to create and be part of the link play, which was good. I think he did his job as a defensive back. And, again, with Jimmy, you know what you're going to get, right? Which is why we were probably so desperate to rush him back into the team, and why we missed him for those first 7-8 games that he wasn't around.
Yeah, and I think it's a good shout. I was leaning towards one of those 2 players as well. Mine would probably be, it'd be controversial because it's not based on this game, but he's been outstanding for us all year, and I think we realised how important he is for us by the fact that he got beaten so badly, and that's Rowan Marshall. But one thing I will absolutely say categorically about Rowe, and everyone has bad games, and that was a bad game. I think he's closer to Max Gawn's level than that game demonstrated. But he has a massive dip, and even in that game, he was still doing that forward, back, forward, back. It wasn't happening for him, and Max obviously got around the ground and took marks and kicked goals. But I think Rowe's work rate was still evidence. It was a game work rate high, output low. That happens sometimes, but work rate was still phenomenally high. He's a machine, Rowe, and if anybody can be forgiven for lowering their colours, I think Rowe has earned that reprieve on the balance of what he's contributed for us. Shannon Knoll Award, Phil, for yours, it's a few that could lift, I'd say.
Well, it's interesting because I think I've done this once before where I've given the Shannon Knoll Award to somebody that I gave a vote. And my Shannon Knoll Award is going to Jack Sinclair. I've got no doubt that they rushed him back, that he wasn't cherry ripe when they brought him back to play against Collingwood. I think he's been underdone both in terms of his preparation and also I think that his tank has been affected as a result. I've heard people say we want to push him right to the half-back flank rather than push him in the middle. You know what? Got to play where the coach puts you. You've got to be able to have the impact wherever you play, and we need you to do what you can, where you can, however often you can. Great guy. This isn't a criticism, but, you know, when you've got Jack Sinclair going at 60% with your disposal efficiency, he needs to be up beyond 80 to 85%. And if he's back up at 80 to 85%, he's using the ball exactly as we need him. So not a knock on him, but we just need him back to be the Jack that we know and love.
H?
It's a tough one again. Well, one of the guys I think needs to have more impact for us. It's not that he hasn't been playing well. It's not that he hasn't done everything he can to keep us in games and that sort of thing. He keeps popping up and kicking an early goal, but fades out a bit. Mitchy Owens. I just want a little bit more impact from him. I just need that thing that he had last year for us. He just seemed to lift us all. He just seemed to just impact the game and get us all excited and get us really up and about and that sort of thing. It just hasn't been there this year. But it's great getting the first goal and getting that excitement early, but yeah, it's just been fading out after a little bit, and it'd just be great to see that play that he had last year in influencing the match come back, because it could make a difference in games coming up. And if it's not there, you kind of almost go, look, there's a big hole in the side, and it's just the impact one player has on the game, and it's amazing how much it can change something.
And this is probably harsh on mine as well, because he's probably been one of a handful of positives for us this year. But I'll just look at Windhager's last month. So he's averaging 21 for the season for a third-year player, effectively a second-year player. So no worries. He's progressing the right way. But if you look at his last month, 25, 18, 17, 16, kicks 14, 12, 9, 4. And then you look at contested possessions through that period as well, where it's 10 to 7, then 13 out of 17 last week, and then 7 again, having had double figures pretty much every week before that. And also across the last month, he's averaged 13 possessions in the first half and 7 in the second. So just a couple of things that he's got to work on, just that consistent output and running all the way through to the line in some of those games. So progressing well, but if we're looking at what the next step might look like, that's probably what that has to be.
Kid growing up in Perth was really built around the Subi Footy Club, to be honest. You know, Dad when I was at probably my impressionable years as, maybe a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, was spent down inside the Subiaco Football Club change rooms. He was a director of the club at the time. I remember jumping inside his car and the smell of Craven A Special Miles as he had his fingers outside the windows, and we'd be off at probably midday-ish to meet him in at Subiaco Oval and watch the back end of the reserves. And we'd always sit up in the grandstand and be supporting the senior team as they played that afternoon. And we'd stay inside the change rooms that night. And so I probably had up until 12 or 13, probably had more Subiaco blood in me. And then as I grew up, I realised the significance of what Dad had done in the '66 premiership team, and that's probably when I started watching. I watched his HSV, as it was back in those days, stuck the old HSV into the TV, and I remember Dad. He was always telling me that he was always best on ground and how he took on Ray Gavlich and all these big name Collingwood players, and he single-handedly beat them down in the back line and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's when my true passion for St Kilda started. And then it began as I would come home on a Sunday night and we'd sit down and have ham, cheese and tomato toasties and watch the winners. And I couldn't wait to see highlights of Trevor Barker and Tony Lockett and these guys, because they were my idols.
So there's a bit been made about one of our latest recruits, Mateus Filippo, being only a couple of days eligible to make the draft.
Mm-hmm.
You were actually 2 days, I guess, younger than what he would have been in the same situation. Your birthday only being the 29th of December. So you've walked into the club after the draft and everything, still only been 17.
Yep.
How was, I guess, you've had the experience through in Western Australia. How was it walking into an AFL club at that age, though?
Absolutely, petrifying, to be honest. I was this 6'3" lump of a kid who, was passionate about playing football with St Kilda and didn't enter the draft back in those days because I was fortunate enough to have a dad who played over 50 games with the Saints. So my legacy was don't enter the draft because at the time, West Coast were thinking about picking me up, but didn't want to pick me up until a later round. And the chances were that I could have gone to another club like Brisbane or at the time Fitzroy, and where everyone's seen sort of what's happening and all that. But my passion was that I wanted to go and play for the Saints, and I was fortunate enough to go over to Melbourne and not be as part of a draft pick and go under the father-son rule and just hope to get a spot, because the spots on the list back then were, I think there was 52 on the list, and it was then a fight to prove myself to stay on the list, which I did, fortunately. But I remember those days. I remember the first day walking into the club and I walked in with Johnny Beveridge, and I walked into the inner sanctum, and Danny Frawley, Stuart Lowe, Tony Lockett were all inside the room, and it was like, whoa, is this actually happening? So, and then I was, I spent my first year playing reserves footy with the Saints under Peter Glascott, I think, was a reserves coach back then. And then Barks took over after a year. And in that second year with Barks, I think everybody on the list, when Stan Ailes took over as senior coach, we finished bottom of the ladder, towards the bottom of the ladder. I think we might have won the wooden spoon that year. We were close. And every player, bar one guy, played 3 games of footy. And that was when it all started. We were thrown in the deep end, a little bit like probably what these younger generation are now. And Filippo is a good example of that, right? He's learning. I learnt my craft in the 2s. He's learning his craft in the 1s, and hats off to him, mate. He's doing a bloody good job.
Tell me, Sarah, it's great to have you on the program, but can you talk a little bit about the pressure? Obviously, you had plenty of games in the Magoos because that's how it was done back then. So when you got your first crack at senior football, did you feel ready?
I felt like I'd done my time. I felt like I'd proven my worth. I remember running around on the oval, and Danny Frawley actually came up to me at the start of training, and Mum and Dad were on their way over to Melbourne, which I didn't know at the time, and he came over to me and put his arm around me and said, "Mate, are you ready?" And at that time I went, for what? And he said, "Mate, you're in this week." And it was like, okay. He said, mate, you're going to get told tonight after training that you're playing. So just run around and have a great training session because you're going to play this week. And it was like the world just got lifted off your shoulders because, every week playing twos footy, you're having to prove yourself. You're trying to get in the best players. You're probably being a little bit selfish in a lot of ways because you want to just be playing the best football for you. But you also, wanting to have really good outcomes. I don't have great memories of winning a lot of footy in twos footy back then. But we were a good team. We had a good bunch of core guys who were great mates. I remember that time really fondly. I still remember that moment when Spud came over and put his arm around me and said, mate, you're ready to go. You've done your time and we feel like now is a good time to bring you up.
Not many people play in a draw on debut. What's that experience like? I mean, obviously you've got the euphoria of playing your first game, but after the game, it's like, well, what do I do now, I imagine?
Yeah, it's funny. You look back. I look back on my time when I played, and I think I must have played Adelaide way too many times. First game was a draw against Adelaide. Grand final loss against Adelaide. Obviously, it was just like too many times when I was playing Adelaide. It was just bad experiences. But yeah, look, playing in a draw was weird. It was like I remember I was playing on Ben Hart on the day, and he was a bloody good player, and I'm not sure I touched the ball too much. I would have had maybe 7 or 8 touches.
Yeah, 10.
I had 10. There you go.
Yeah.
Which was probably about my average for my career. So, he was an amazing player. So for me to have 10 possessions that day, I was pretty pumped. And it was just, I think the next week was just about knowing what was going to happen next week. Stan had told us that you're going to get 3 games. So, I don't think you're going to come up and get dropped. You're going to have 3 games. We're going to have a look at you, and then we'll make our decision over summer of whether you're going to stay or not.
Yeah, just had a quick look, and you played Adelaide 12 times. Geelong was the next most at 9, and
yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah, only 2 wins out of those 12 as well. So yeah, it was a bit ordinary against them, but yeah, they had that period of time where they were pretty good. So
that was strong, right? And we for some reason just like today, I think in today's football we really struggle to match up against Essendon, Hawthorn, and North Melbourne. They're our 3 bogey sides at the moment. We just can't get past.
Yeah. But so you had the draw in the first game. It took to your 9th game to get the win. You talk about having the weight off the shoulders getting the first game. How was the weight off the shoulders after the first win?
Yeah, that was like an experience to remember. Singing the club song was just like that was to be inside the inner sanctum and to be singing the club song was awesome. To be finally. I think you feel like you've actually become a footballer when you win a game and you're singing the club song and you're being part of something pretty special.
Tell me, if I jump forward to 97 and 98, can you talk us through the euphoria of making a grand final, then the despair of losing it, and then backing up into 1998 where you probably turned up thinking you've got it all ahead of yourselves, and then the year kind of just fell apart. A bit like our year this year, to be honest with you.
Yeah. 97 was it was a bit of a strange year, right? We didn't start the season off too well. I think we were, from memory, we might have only won 1 game from the first 5 games. 4 games.
1 and 4. Yeah,
1 and 4, and then we went on a long roll of winning. Did we win 14 straight?
Yep.
Or did we look? We might have lost 1 game in between there. I think we lost 1 game leading up into the finals.
9 in a row into the grand final and 16 of 18 or something. Yeah,
it was a really good run, and there was a great amount of belief in the team, and that's the thing that I remember about 97 was the group of players had this amazing sense that we were on an experience. And we were backing each other in 100% of the way, and there was a belief that we were going to play in a grand final. I think we did everything right, but there was just some circumstances that were beyond our control. Guys didn't have great preparations that week, and it just overwhelmed us, I think, in the last quarter. And when Jarman comes out and kicks what he did on Jamie Shanahan, who I think he might have had maybe 25 goals kicked on him all year out of 21 games. Or 22 games, and then he gets 5 kicked on him in a grand final after having such an amazing year. was no one expected it, and it was one of those, I suppose, one of those sad days in St Kilda's history where we just couldn't get over the line. And you run out there, and the euphoria in front of, I think it was 98,000 people, is just mind blowing. And there's no experience in this world that can give you that sense of euphoria when you run out there, and you just hear the roar of the crowd, and the sense and the feeling and the expectation of the day still gives me tingles when I think about it. And I know when that siren sound, it becomes very quickly your worst nightmare.
So
Sorry, Phil, go.
So we get past obviously the defeat, and and that probably burns over the summer, and then 98 rocks around, and there's a little bit of turmoil to come at the club. How do you cope with that as a player, and how do you then align your expectations of, you've just played off in a grand final, everyone regards the team as a pretty good team, a young team full of great talent.
Yeah.
And you've got it all ahead. You've got Spider coming back from injury. You've got Vidovic there coming back from injury. Of course, both missed in the grand final. And it's looking like a pretty promising time for the club. And then it all falls apart.
Yeah, I look back on that period of time, and I think the playing group was certainly driven like nothing else to be to be part of something special again. And I know the work ethic in the playing group was second to none. We came out in 98 after losing the grand final, and we had a great pre-season. We had all the players that we wanted to available. We were winning games of footy. We were playing the style we wanted to play. But then I think we just slowly during the year we just lost our way. And I think probably at that point Stan started to lose his feel with the playing group. And by the end of the year, there was obviously people that didn't like the way Stan was coaching the team, and unfortunately the press, God bless his soul, rest in peace, had to make a decision and made a decision to bring in Tim Watson. And that was, I loved my time with Stan. He got a lot out of me personally, and he certainly gave me the hunger and the passion and the drive every day to get the best out of myself.
Feels like sorry. I was going to say, it felt like 98 to that point had been the best season of your career. But I was going to say, in terms of your dad, who we mentioned earlier, and seeking advice from him, were there various stages in your career in particular where you spoke to him about it, be it your first game? And was the grand final one of those where you that week you leant into his ear a bit and said, what do I expect? And even after a year like 98, when a coach gets the flick, is that another time where you might say, you've been through all of this sort of stuff in footy, what do you think?
Yeah, look, Dad was always one to, he sort of stayed away from offering me too much advice around, probably all that detail around how I should be probably feeling around different things. But he was more, I suppose, more concerned about my what I was putting on the park every week. And he would give me feedback around how I was performing as a footballer and the things that I had to work on, because everything else would look after itself along the way. So Dad was always a pretty harsh critic. I remember, he was obviously a lawyer here in Perth, and he would come over as a director of the Eagles at the time, and he would be making notes inside the record, and he'd go back, put it all through his dictaphone, and then I'd get a letter 3 or 4 days later, which had been nicely typed up by his secretary with a little love dad on it. And there was always it was like 4 pages of, you need to do this, you didn't do this, you need to work on that, you did this well. It was, it was like a novel by the end of it. And unfortunately I didn't keep all of the letters that he sent over to me. I think it ended up burning a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Took some advice on and didn't take some of the other stuff. But it was a tough period, coming off the back of losing a grand final. But I felt like after that game, I felt like there was still a point to prove, and I feel like probably 98 was probably my best year of footy because I felt like I was still had a point to prove.
Now, I don't think I've asked this to any of the players you played with over the time, but do you feel like that Waverley was a ground that we used to an advantage at all? Like we trained, I don't think we trained there all that often. We generally trained in Moorabbin, but
Yeah,
the size of the ground was compared to nothing else. The pockets, the wings, they were all just the biggest place you'll ever find. You could actually get lost out there at times, it would seem.
yeah.
Did you find that we used the ground to an advantage over some other teams, especially maybe Sydney coming from a bigger or the tiny SCG and that sort of thing? It's something we used to our advantage over those years?
I think we ended up using it to our advantage because we had the run and stun game. You know, we had the ability with the Tony Browns and the Aussie Joneses and the Matthew Lappins and the Joel Smiths to have an impact at the contest and around stoppages, to be a run and carry and distribute type of side. And then we had, you know, Barry Hall, Barry Hall and Lowy, you know, up forward as well as, you know, Spider Everett at times. And I felt like we were playing the type of football that we needed to play at Waverley. And I certainly enjoyed the open spaces of Waverley. You know, it was always, I felt like it was a place where if you were prepared to work extremely hard, you'd get the rewards.
Can I take you to Tim Watson?
Yeah.
Talk us
sure.
through the show that was Tim Watson. It started off with a bang, and of course I was at Waverley for the 66-point turnaround, and it kind of felt like at that point the mojo was done.
Yeah. It was a strange experience with Tim. I hurt my knee in 99 in his first full year. So I missed a bit of footy with Tim, but then I played most of 2000 coming back from my knee. And then when I snapped my patella tendon. But Tim's time was, I think coming from a club like Essendon, I think Tim really struggled with our culture and with the style in which the playing group played. I think Essendon was at that time probably a lot more professional than what we were, and probably had higher standards and a different ethos around how they played football to what we were, the way we were playing. He was very much a transition coach, you know, understanding that when we were attacking, we were, you know, using the ball effectively and running efficiently to try and drive the ball to kick goals. And then the minute the ball went into a disputed area or into a contest, it was transition back to defence. And it took us a long time to adjust to that type of coach. And I think, you know, Tim did a pretty good job, but I think he was probably overwhelmed at the end of it. In that, you know, he had a big job to do. He had some pretty big shoes. He had some pretty big egos and players and administrators trying to run the club at the time, which I think was probably to the detriment of everyone.
Now, your last year and his last year, the same in 2000, statistically he had a very good season, went on a big run towards the back end of the year. St Kilda made an enormous amount of list changes, and you were one of those and went across to the West Coast Eagles. Can you sort of take us through how that happened? And did you feel that you were a victim of circumstance in a lot of respects because you were actually playing some really consistent footy?
Yeah, look, I felt like I was still had a lot to offer at the Saints. I felt like I was, you know, on the back of some pretty bad knee surgery in snapping my patella tendon. I think at the time there'd only been 3 footballers who'd done that out on the Oval. I think there was me, Michael Long, and Gary Buckenara. I think were the 3 guys who had snapped their patella tendons. And then I sort of got back from that after having nearly 15 months out of the game and felt like I was contributing really well. I thought I was, doing everything right to keep my spot. I was probably playing a little bit more as a defender more than a forward at that time under Tim, and I felt like I was playing really good footy. And then, at the back end of the season, I got called into the director of football at the time, which was Grant Thomas, and he basically said to me, "Look, we think that you're going to be then," and they offered me a 2-year contract. And I'd been at the club for I think 9 years at the time, and I'd signed 8 1-year contracts, and I was sick of continually having to sign and prove myself every year. And I felt like I'd done that. I'd played 93 games. I was on the cusp of my next season, my 10th season, and playing over 100 games and becoming hopefully I was wanting to be a one club player. And then went into Grant's office and he said, "Look, mate, at the end of the day, we're going to give you we're offering you a 2-year performance-based contract, but ultimately we want Fraser Gehry. And if we can't get him, then all these other kids are going to play in front of you, and you're going to play twos."
So going back a little bit to 96, there's a couple of significant moments during that season. We start the season off fantastic. We win the pre-season comp. Everyone seems to be ticking that at that time, and teams playing well together. Take us through that night, and another one we went through with Christian Bards the other week. Whereabouts were you? That was obviously a crowd invasion that night, but another crowd invasion was the 96 lights out game. Whereabouts were you when that happened?
I was out on the Oval. That was a really weird experience, right? That was so there's a couple of questions to unpack there. So firstly, the night the lights went off, and we all went down underneath down into the change rooms. I remember hearing stories about St Kilda supporters running right out on Waverley Park and snapping goalposts and burning them in the middle of the Oval and all this sort of stuff. It was like, we never saw any of that. So it was like all these. I suppose it felt like it was myth. But crazily, you knew that St Kilda supporters, with their passion, were likely to do all of that and the above. So it was a crazy experience. The night the lights went off, and I remember then having to play the next Wednesday, I think, and it was the hardest 3 days of your life, and we got belted by Essendon on the way back. The year of the 96. Was it Ansett Cup back then?
Yeah.
Ansett Cup win.
Yep.
And I can't remember, but I think that was the night I broke my thumb. Did we play Carlton that night?
Yeah.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. So we played Carlton. And I remember maybe I didn't play. Maybe it was, when did I break my thumb? It must have been 97 that I broke my thumb. Anyway, might have been 97 against North. Because it was against.
Because you did miss the first 5 weeks in 97, so
yeah, that's right. So it was 97. We were playing Carlton in a day-night game because I hit Koudafides
semi-final, that year,
and that it was a semi-final. Yep, and so 97. I broke my thumb and missed the first 5 weeks. But 96 was I remember not playing that well that night, but the club we'd had an amazing win. Right, we beat. Was it North we beat?
Carlton.
Oh, we did beat Carlton. Carlton. We beat Carlton that night, and it was like 10-goal win, and it was just like an amazing. Everything just fell into place that night. Everyone was playing well, except for me. But that's fine. I had to accept that. I think I came off with only 3 or 4 touches. But I know that Lowy kicked a bucket of goals, and all the boys contributed. So I was always a team player first, and individual stuff comes second.
Now, if I can ask you, obviously, I've referenced the boys at the moment playing with probably a significant lack of confidence, I think, more than anything.
Yeah.
What's it like to have the confidence flying high and then slowly lose it and really question yourself as a player, and also to lose trust in your teammates?
Yeah, you probably never lose trust in. You probably never lose your trust I think probably what happens is that you lose. You just lose. It's hard to describe, right? You want everything to fall in place. When you lose your confidence, you work extremely hard to get that back, right? And there's no one could ever doubt that the boys are probably trying as hard as they can, right? And they would be doing everything they can over the week to get themselves back to getting that confidence level back. And the only place you can do that is on the training track. And you can only expect that they are doing all they can to get that confidence back, and it can happen very quickly. I remember it happening in '97, literally overnight. It was a game of football. It was must have been round 5. Who did we play? It was
Melbourne.
Melbourne.
Them at Waverley, yeah.
That was the game, right? That was the game that everything just fell into place, and from then on, we had the confidence that what we were doing was the right thing. And you then start to run. You don't run harder. You don't run because and make position in any other way. You just do it because you feel that it's the right thing to do. And you just start having the confidence. You start touching the ball, and then all of a sudden, as you're getting tackled, there's support around you. There's people helping you out, and the players are just working it out and just off their own natural feel of the game. And it can come and go very quickly, and it can come in an instant, but it generally will dissolve over a period of time.
So if we again reference the game that we just played in on the weekend, we saw quite a few players starting to argue with each other. Is that a good thing because they're happy to talk about it on the field, or is it really something that it's like, guys, come on, we've got to focus on what we're meant to be doing rather than looking to blame each other for why a player's loose?
Look, I think all that stuff on the ground can only be seen as being constructive. At the end of the day, they've got a job to do in either defending when they need to defend or an attack when they need to attack. I think our defenders are doing a pretty good job. We are just, for some reason, we cannot find a way to connect our backs with our mids and our mids with our forwards. And where that disconnect is, I don't know. That's a question that the coaching staff need to answer fast. They need to find that. They need to find the conduit between, good defense and outright attack. Because I got the luxury of going and watching, and I beg to say this, but I went and watched West Coast play Melbourne here 2 weeks ago, and you would not recognise that West Coast team. The week later they go and play Adelaide in Adelaide, and they just don't run, and they don't do the things that they did against Melbourne. Now, is that a lack of confidence? Is that because they were going into Melbourne, they were going into that Adelaide game absolutely chock full of confidence, and they get absolutely humiliated by Adelaide over in Adelaide. West Coast don't have 50,000 screaming fans screaming at them. Adelaide have got their fans, but at the end of the day, it's all a mentality. It's the boys have just got to understand that they've got a job to do out there, and they've got to go and back themselves up and go and help each other out.
Yeah, and that's what I've tried to say on the podcast a bit, is that it can happen good and bad very quickly, and that you're never far away from it going up or down. The last one from me, what's life entailed since then? Obviously had a bit to do with Scotty Waters before he came across to the Saints when he coached 2012-13, but what are you up to these days in terms of what's keeping you busy?
So I've just started a new job actually with a commercial real estate company, Burgess Rawson, WA. So I look after all their large format real estate here in WA, and manage some clients in what they lease from a big box real estate piece. Yeah, which I really enjoy.
So just give us that name again, Sarah, for all our WA listeners out there.
Burgess Rawson, WA. So if they've got any land they want to sell, it's all commercial real estate. So any land sales or any leasing, more than happy to have a conversation.
And obviously with Security getting there this weekend, I'm sure you'll probably get along to the game. Do you get back to Melbourne much to see many games, or functions or anything?
I don't get over to Melbourne that much. I actually, Dad's in Melbourne this week over there visiting a few people and doing a few things. But unfortunately, I don't get to Melbourne that often. I was over there last year, but didn't get to see a game. I catch up with a couple of boys sometimes when I get over there, but the tyranny of distance these days gets a little bit hard. I've got a young family who are going through school, so most of my money's all cooped up into making sure that they're getting a good education and keeping a roof over their heads. But I've got two boys who are passionate St Kilda supporters who will be going to the game this weekend, and they will be very dirty if the Saints lose.
So how old are your boys, Sarah?
I've got a 14 and a 14-year-old boy, a 11-year-old boy, and a 7-year-old daughter.
Now, if you want to watch a grown man cry on camera, tell me that they're amazing footballers, because you're 7 games short of father and son. And to coin a phrase that this podcast loves, that would be so St Kilda to have 2 great players that we can't pick because we didn't get you to 100 games.
Yeah, look, it's I think it's a discussion that my boys have with me very regularly. I coach both their teams. And they are always at me. Is there any way? Surely you can scrounge another 7 games.
Well, I've got an idea, right? We've got the mid-season draft coming on, right? All we need to do is get you to nominate and put you on the emergency, sit you on the bench,
7 weeks
as the sub for 7 weeks.
Yeah, I don't reckon I could. I don't reckon I could do that these days because I had my knee replaced about 6 months ago, so I'm I can only sort of hobble around these days. So
well, you on one knee, mate, still better than most of us on 2.
Well, I might be bad at lookalikes, but for anyone who watches this video, I actually reckon there's a little bit of a resemblance in your face with Jack Steele these days. So maybe he can just change his name to yours, and you'll get the 7 games that way through him. So that might conceivably.
I would happily play under Jack Steele any day of the week because he is an absolute legend.
Hey, can I just ask you a quick? Can I just ask you a quick question about your playing days? Concussion, of course, is a far better known topic today than it ever was.
Yeah,
I know you suffered a really bad concussion in your last few games at West Coast.
Yep.
Do you recall getting a concussion and not talking to the club about it because you were fearful of losing your spot in the team, or watching how it was dealt then versus now, and the importance that kids are growing up with it?
It's a really good question, right? I think concussions and injuries back in those days were dealt with as well. You know, if you've got a little niggle, just toughen up, mate. Go and play. Get your body out there and just have a crack and just play. You know, and I think that we grew up in an era where we'd be taking Panadols and Sudafeds and all this sort of stuff to numb the pain and just get through and just mask it and do your best. Whereas today, the boys are growing up in an environment where if they're not absolutely 100%, they don't play. And I think that that's a good thing for football. I think that I was probably fortunate enough where I didn't get too many head knocks around my playing days. There was probably the odd punch in the back of the head, which you just wore and learned to go on with. There was I don't recall times when I had blurred vision or I was headachy. I was always achy after games and all that sort of stuff, but never from a head knock, fortunately, other than the time when I was knocked out down in Cardinia Park when Stephen King belted me. And should have got 10 weeks and didn't. Should have got reported and he didn't. I should have got a free kick and didn't. And the umpires went play on. So, I look back at that time and that incident and, I really have a lot of bad vibes around what happened from a number one, from an umpiring position, and number 2, from an AFL piece around, they needed to take a stand and actually do the things, because if that had happened in today's game, he would have got 6 or 8 weeks without doubt, without a question.
So I'll just finish up with 3 very quick questions for you. The best player, and you've played with some amazing players, both at St Kilda and West Coast, but the best player you ever played with?
Nicky Winmar, without a doubt. Hands down, by far, the most talented individual I've ever known.
Best player to play the game in your lifetime that you've watched? Not including your dad?
No, probably there's a couple here. Watching Wayne Carey playing next to and against him. At times he was just phenomenal. And say with Gary Ablett, they were just the hardest men to play on. They were both all consuming, and they were just unbelievably talented. And they would turn the game within 3 minutes. The game would be gone.
And last one from me: pineapple on a pizza, yes or no?
No.
Nice little random way to finish. Well, as we wrap things up, I said you're the name that comes up whenever we talk about St Kilda father-sons. I do certainly hope that there'll be a few others that we can actually add to that list somewhere along the line. I know Stewie's got a young boy who's a fair way off, but he's 11, I think, but he looks all right. Aussie Jones's kid, Justin Peckett's got a couple, I think. So he's got about 11 sons, but there's a couple that aren't too far away. But thank you very much for jumping on.
Thanks, boys.
Appreciate the journey. David Seirakowski there looks in ripping nick, I must say. He looks like he retired yesterday based on the way he presents himself on the camera. So still in very good shape is Sierra, and feels like he wouldn't be too out of place at centre half back or something like that, playing at any level of football. We look ahead to the West Coast Eagles. We've won this fixture the last 2 years. The Eagles have found a gear of sorts and have sort of jumped up a bit this year. They're still 3-8 like us. They just lost a game by 100 points. Admittedly, that was away from home. They're back in their own environment where they are a much better side, and that's usually been the case for them. I think the first step on West Coast Road back was to protect the home fortress again, which they're starting to do. And obviously the next step for them would be to do it on the road, but that doesn't matter. We play them at Marvel later in the year. This is the Perth version. And I think we're underdogs for a justifiable reason based on form. But at the same time, if you're 3-8 and they're 3-8, of course you can win. It just comes down to plotting the path and how you get it done. I did mention a few weeks ago around Jack Hayes on the injury list that he's clearly a talented player, but will he play 20 or 120 games? And this latest injury setback makes you start to think that his body just might not let him. But in terms of selections, Phil, you would think that the logic would go Crouch, Clark. You'd think Butler would need another based on the criteria that they've set. So Crouch, Clark in, and then Collard, or maybe Membry who kicked 6. So let's go Crouch, Clark, Membry for Sharman, Collard, and one other. Is that sort of how you'd look at the changes?
So this is kind of where
Ross,
I'm stuck,
maybe, yeah,
right? With Cooper Sharman, and I know that he is a bit of a love child of mine. I think the club does him a great disservice by not playing him in a set position. We've had that discussion with Nick on this pod a number of times this season and beyond. So until they decide where he plays and how he plays, he needs to either take every game by the scruff of its neck, or he needs to go back to Sandy and dominate for 3 or 4 weeks in a position and say, right, that's going to be mine. And I think a couple of weeks ago, Age, you might correct me if I'm wrong, he did that when he was in defence. He came on the field this week and he had a set shot from 40 out. He's usually a pretty reliable shot, but he pushed it across the face of goal. That he needs to take every opportunity that he gets. I think Membry is a great opportunity. I think his 6 goals shows where he's at. But again, when he was dropped, we haven't been told by the club what they want him to go and work on. And again, I don't understand. I don't think that there's a reason not to be telling us what they want from players. I think it was Ross that talked about selection integrity a couple of weeks back. Well, I don't see much selection integrity at the moment. And that's not to say that there isn't any, but I can't see it with the changes. He talked about selection integrity 2 weeks ago. And then last week, Collard came in with only 5 possessions at Sandringham. Now, he may have done exactly what Ross asked him to do when he went back to Sandy, but we don't know that. We're not aware of that, and that's okay. We're not in the inner sanctum. But nevertheless, I think that we have to go with the obvious ones. And I think, Darren, you're right. I think Membry has to come back in. He provides that high half-forward lead. which can allow Max King to play closer to goal, which is, I think, where he's better suited at the moment. I think Hunter Clark has to come back in. You can't have somebody with that kind of class playing his time out in Sandy. And Brett Crouch, you know what? If the young guys aren't ready, getting games into them when they're getting pelted each week is not actually going to be useful to their development. So again, unless Ross comes out and says, this is why we're playing the guys we are, this is why we're not playing the guys we're not, and this is what fans should be able to expect from us, and this is why I'm doing it, just got to put guys in form into the team.
Where do we
integrity,
think?
Yeah.
Where do we think the likes of Allison sit? Is he someone that we just throw in there and say, show us what you got, give us something different, give us something that will make us say that, oh, we've taken too long to pick you, or this is the level you should be playing at, or something. I mean, he's shown a bit on the weekend. We don't know what, like, Richmond aren't obviously the best team in the VFL level, but at the same time, it's a question of, do you play someone like that just to get a game and see what they do have? And if it doesn't work, so be it. We know, and that's the thing. You've got to try something to know whether it works or not. It's the sort of player that I guess we could almost bring in for Sharman. There's a bit of a replacement there. You go, okay, that's the kind of player that he would probably replace. I don't see why, with how we're sitting, take a risk. Why not? Just say that no player is guaranteed to get into the senior team, but if you show something, we'll try you. We'll give you a go. I just feel like it's time to actually try something different, because what's working at the moment, or what we're doing at the moment, isn't working. And hey, as I said, the worst thing that can happen is we realize that he's not going to make it, and that's the best way to work it out, is actually put him in the situation, see how he goes.
Yeah, and it might therefore accelerate your development. You get answers to those questions and the like. But yeah, I mean, I think each selection each week has made us a little bit better. It's just the performances haven't yet matched it. Hopefully that comes. Obviously Higgins gives us a nice boost, but yeah, it's not doing Collard any good, I think, to play when he's not ready. So allow him to have a decent run at it. He's obviously demonstrated that he's just not quite finding that level at this point. Before we give a final thought on that game, just summing up some of our listener questions. Daniel Cherney, who's been a guest on this show a couple of times, says, why can't we have nice things? A question we ask a lot. Joe says, do you think having 20 players out of contract might be contributing to the poor season we're having? The mood around the club wouldn't be all that great. I hope not, maybe, but you would hope they'd be mature enough to, I mean, you don't want people playing for themselves, and you would hope that's not happening. Another talk around potential debutants with Ari, Houghton, Keeler, and Heath. Look, Ari was very close to debuting. He would have played against Hawthorn, but got concussed. Keeler's not quite ready. Heath's put a good fortnight together, but probably needs a bit more. Houghton, out of nowhere, kicked 5 goals on the weekend, but I don't think he looked close.
That's what I meant earlier, to be honest. Yeah. Sorry. Well, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, but Allison kicked 5 the week before as well. Yeah. So they both popped up and done that. I think 5 against Casey was probably better than 5 against what Richmond put out. So
yeah.
But look, they both contributed. But do they need to do it a little bit longer? What else have we got here? Thoughts on Josh Battle not signing? We're apparently offering him a 6-year contract, but still hasn't signed. Look, I'm not surprised that hasn't happened yet. And Michael says, what should I do this Saturday instead of watching the game? You'll have a little bit of daylight left if you wanted to play golf or something, but that'll run out reasonably quickly at 4:30 start Victorian time. But Yeah, I don't know. You can always drink or something. That's usually not a bad strategy. But
They'll put the lights out earlier. Yeah.
well, yeah, they'll just go to you can go to the driving range. They'll have the lights on, and you can potentially have a beer whilst you're whacking golf balls and let off some frustration that way. Yeah, I guess final thoughts before we wrap it up on the Eagles. They're guys like Yo and obviously Harley Reid and have really given them a bit of a boost. Duggan, obviously, with his leadership and what they're getting out of Kelly and these sorts of players. Bailey Williams has been solid for them in the ruck, the other Bailey Williams. And then you look at their core with Darling and McGovern and young Waterman's obviously been pretty impressive too. So they're building a base between kids and experience, but in essence, it's a 50-50 game. The market says Eagles marginal favourites. H, do you kind of see it that way? It feels like, well, if we lose, we'll lose by 11 points. And if we
generally
win, probably
don't
win by 11.
Yeah, we generally don't win over there anyway. And that's probably part of why we go in as underdogs. And even when we were traveling all right and they were right at their absolute pits, going back 2 seasons or so, and we just scraped over the line against them over there, and any win in interstate's a good win, and any win in Perth's a great win at times, and yeah, I mean it's going to take our best to probably beat them, and it's a case of we go over there and won't be surprised if we do lose. There won't be any shock factored behind that. But you've got to take what Adelaide did last week. They denied the ball, and when they had the ball, they just ran like hell. And they just basically played as a game that kept West Coast like low scoring because they never had the opportunity to actually score because they just kept the ball away from them. We've got that ability to run. We've got that ability to just play keepings off. We had that ability to deny in the back line. But which one of those three will work and the rest won't? Because that's what's happened most games. One thing's worked and nothing else has. So can we have a game where all this sort of stuff works? We play just free-flowing football. We just run. We just play on whenever we have the opportunity. We just attack. I mean, I think a lot of people out there are just going, let's watch attacking football. If the ball turn over and go the other way, I mean, that's what's been happening anyway when we've been playing just chippy, missed target, ball runs back the other way. Let's play attacking football and see what happens. Let's the best football we've seen for us this year has been running attacking football, and we've just gone back into our shell and not done it. So, hey, it's a fast ground. Conditions, from what I've actually heard, might be a little bit wet actually. Whether that plays back into our way a little bit or not, don't think it's really going to make much difference. But yeah, let's just attack with every opportunity we've got, and as Adelaide did, don't give them the opportunities to get the ball.
And the final question I'll give you, Phil, on that is that, alluding again back to Ross's presses where he keeps talking about them overcorrecting, where they don't kick to a contest enough one week and he'll mention that, then they'll do it 100 times in a row. I mean, it's a credit to them that they're listening, and it's a credit to him that he's got them listening. So that, I think that's positive. But are they being overcoached in the sense that they're following the instructions so rigidly that there's no freedom? Is there a case of what H is saying where it's just throw the shackles off and it's just like, just play footy and enjoy yourself? It's been a pretty shit 2 months. See what happens. Left yourself muted there. Sorry, buddy. Gotcha.
That's just the natural position that my family love to have me in, which is understandable. But I think, as with anything, it's a bit of column A and a bit of column B, right? So I think you need a little bit of structure in the game. So there are some fundamentals that you can't move away from. And I think that needs to be simplified. And then the coach says to him, outside of these core values that we want to be known for, express yourself and and do what you can to help a teammate out and to push us moving forward. You know, I've often heard coaches before, not just St Kilda coaches, always say that sometimes interstate travel is really good because it brings a group together. It allows them to go away. It allows them to have a bit more alone time with each other as a group. I'm hoping that that's beneficial to us this weekend. I think we're going to play our best game for a long time, which is really a low bar to have to jump with, I've got to say. And I'm expecting us to win by, 4 or 5 goals.
And look, I think we need that for no other reason than just to relieve a bit of frustration. It won't necessarily change things one way or another, but it's probably exactly what the doctor orders, I think, in this situation, just to get us all feeling good again. And hopefully that does indeed happen. We'll await with bated breath, obviously, for those that are venturing across to Perth, those hardy souls. Enjoy the trip. For those watching it around wherever you happen to be in Australia, hopefully it's as stress-free. I mean, that's one thing. If you fall closer and closer to being out of finals contention, it doesn't hurt as much. So that's one thing. But we'll wait and see how the afternoon unfolds on Saturday. But in the meantime, go Saints.